They say a person's safest place is their home. For 19-year-old Hannah Whitmore, home was not safety. It was a sentence. The year was 1891. Red Hollow was a narrow mining settlement tucked between the northern hills of England, where the wind never truly rested and neither did hardship. The winters were long, the wages were short, and men carried their tempers the way they carried coal, heavy and blackened. Hannah rose before dawn every morning. Before the sky turned from ink to ash, she had already lit the stove, hauled water from the pump, scrubbed the stone floor, and learned to move without sound. Because if her stepfather, Thomas Whitmore, woke in a foul mood, the day began with a blow. He was not truly her father, just the man her mother had married after grief hollowed her out. A tall, broad figure, with hands like iron tools and a voice that lived permanently at the edge of anger. "Have you finished yet?" His voice barked from the doorway. "Yes," Hannah answered softly. It was a lie. Truth was expensive in that house. Thomas stepped into the room, his boots leaving streaks of mud across the floor she had just cleaned. He glanced at the small pile of firewood near the hearth. "You'll take those to market. 3 shillings, no less. If you come back short..." His eyes drifted to the leather strap hanging from a nail in the wall. "You know the consequence." Hannah nodded. Red Hollow saw everything: bruises, shouting, fear. But in small towns, survival meant silence. She carried the bundle of wood into the village square. The air smelled of frost and damp wool. Chimneys coughed thin columns of smoke into the pale sky. Market day was sparse. Work in the mines had slowed since the eastern seam flooded. By mid-afternoon, she had sold the wood. 2 shillings. Her stomach tightened. On the walk home, she paused by the riverbank. The water was iron cold, sliding quietly over stone. She sat and let the tears fall where no one could see. Perhaps this was simply life. Perhaps some people were born to endure. A shadow stretched over her boots. She looked up. A man stood before her, tall, easily over 6'4", broad across the shoulders, wrapped in a dark wool coat lined with shearling. His beard was trimmed but thick, and his eyes were a striking storm gray. The villagers called him the Warden. His real name was said to be Elijah Mercer, though few dared use it. He lived in the high moors beyond the ridge, in a stone cottage half swallowed by mist. He came down only to trade supplies and then vanished again. "Why are you crying?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "I'm not," she replied. He studied her for a long moment. "Don't insult us both," she swallowed. "I was meant to earn 3 shillings. And you earned 2. She nodded. "And what happens if you return short?" She hesitated. "He'll use the strap." Elijah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a coin. A single silver crown. She stepped back. "I won't take charity." "It isn't charity," he replied evenly. "It's a loan. You may repay it when you no longer need it." No one had ever spoken to her as though she possessed a future. She took the coin. That evening, the house reeked of gin before she even opened the door. Thomas counted the money, his brow furrowed. 3 shillings? From that bundle? I managed. His suspicion flared. Who gave you the extra? No one. The strap came down from the wall. Before it could rise, the front door swung inward with a force that rattled the hinges. Cold air rushed in, and behind it stood Elijah Mercer. Thomas froze. "This is my house," Thomas snarled, recovering. "Get out." Elijah stepped inside without haste. "She is not your property." Thomas lunged. It ended quickly. No shouting. No prolonged fight, just controlled strength and finality. Thomas found himself pinned to the floorboards. Breath knocked from him, pride fractured. Elijah released him slowly. "If I ever hear that you've laid a hand on her again," he said quietly, "you will not enjoy the outcome." He turned to Hannah. "Pack what you can carry." Her heart hammered. "Where would I go?" "Up." She looked at the strap, at the man wheezing on the floor, at the walls that had held her fear for years. Then she moved. The climb into the moors was brutal. The wind cut across the hills like a blade. Frost hardened the earth beneath their boots. Twice she slipped on the narrow track. The second time she twisted her ankle. Elijah said nothing. He simply lifted her as though she weighed nothing and carried her the remaining stretch. His heartbeat was slow and even beneath her cheek. Steady. They reached the cottage at dusk. Thick stone walls, a slate roof, smoke rising from the chimney. Inside, warmth greeted them. Not luxury, but order. Clean wooden floors. Shelves lined with books. Maps pinned carefully to the walls. "Stay by the fire," he instructed. He knelt and removed her soaked boots. Her feet were pale from cold. "If you warm them too quickly, you'll lose feeling for good," he said, placing them gently in a basin of lukewarm water. His hands were rough, scarred, and yet deliberate. She looked around the room. "All these books. Have you read them?" "Yes." "All of them?" "Several times." "Why?" He added another log to the fire. "The winters are long. A mind left idle begins to rot." She hesitated. "Can you teach me?" He looked at her fully then. "Yes." Days turned into weeks. He taught her to read by candlelight, to split wood without wasting strength, to track weather by the color of clouds, to fire a rifle, to mend a roof tile before the storm arrived. Her hands hardened. Her posture straightened. The fear in her eyes slowly gave way to something steadier. One afternoon, standing again by the river that once held her tears, she held out the silver crown. "I'd like to repay the loan." Elijah glanced at it.
"Keep it."
"You said it wasn't charity." "It wasn't." "Then what was it?" He considered. "An investment." She frowned slightly. "In what?" "In the possibility that you might live differently." The wind moved through the tall grass around them. Down in Red Hollow, life continued as it always had. But Hannah no longer belonged to it. Because sometimes salvation does not arrive as a rescuer. Sometimes it arrives as someone who refuses to let you remain small. And sometimes, the coldest hills in England are warmer than the house you were born into.